Yeah.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of IHP Talks, where we chit-chat with folks across the country doing LGBTQ history, archiving, and community organizing. I'm Megan Sullivan, she, her, hers, and I'm here with my colleague.
Josh Burford, he, him, his.
And today we're super excited to bring our guest. Meg, if you would want to introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, where you are, what you do, any other tidbits we know before we jump in.
Sure. So my name is Meg Metcalf, she, they, and I am the Women's, Gender, and LGBTQ Plus Studies Specialist and Librarian at the Library of Congress, and I am here in Washington, D.C.
So I've been thinking about how to kick off our conversation this whole time. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how gay is the Library of Congress?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like Center Square, 1976, Match Game gay?
I'd say they're OG gay because our collections go back so far. And as we know, queer people have always existed. And so literally through our collections, we have LGBTQ people and communities represented. And that goes all the way back to pre-book technologies like cuneiform tablets and illuminated manuscripts. So I'd say pretty gay. I'd say pretty gay.
I always wonder what the biggest misconception community people have about actually accessing your materials at LOC.
Oh yeah. Well, of course, people think that we are not a library, that we're a museum, that you can't just come in off the street and request to see an item. And that's absolutely not true. Mm-hmm. Anyone 16 or older can come and get their library card and can come and see our incredible collections, which include just an impressive array of LGBTQ materials.
And you've been working really hard, I know, in the Library of Congress, but on your Instagram too, to pull out these, these sort of, I mean, are they hidden? Are they undercover? Do people just not know materials?
It's kind of both, because on the one hand, I mean, I think there's this expectation people have that everything is available online. And when you're a librarian and you have an understanding of how the publishing industry works, and specifically how it works with marginalized people, which is not very well at all, even today. The thing that people don't realize is that a lot of this history is actually, it's hidden in these books that nobody knows about, or it's behind a massive paywall, like in a subscription database. And there's just these incredible, incredible materials. And so often I meet people and they just don't even have a sense of LGBTQ history at all. And that's not completely their fault, because these resources really are not accessible.
Well, and so I think that people don't know enough about archives anyway, period.
Right.
They certainly
it's scary.
Don't. It is, right, exactly. And I think that the queer archives that get the most traction are the ones that have been around a long time, but that includes you, right? It's not just one institute and New York Public Library. You guys have had stuff for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Thomas Jefferson is our founding collection, and as we all know, he had some very specific opinions on gay people. And even before then, you go back to colonial times, we have the trial of Thomasine Hall, and even before that, Native and Indigenous people and their, queer cultures. So it really does span the centuries.
So, I mean, I'm super familiar with archives, obviously, since this is what I do.
Really?
I'm gay and an archivist for a living, which is a good gig if you can get it. But the question is, if someone is just curious, let's just say someone is curious about lesbian identity, how do they even go about managing a collection as vast as yours? What does that look like?
See, that's the thing is, I think at the world's largest library, you're always going to have a problem scaling. And so I have a LGBTQ studies LibGuide that's about to go live, and it's enormous. It took me forever to put together because I'm doing by time period, by format, by location. So in some ways, it's sort of like creating these virtual wayfinding tools like research guides and videos to try to explain. And coming up, I'm going to try to do a video series, which gives a more visual array of the LGBTQ collections. And I'll probably start with the Kameny and the Vincennes papers, because we have really strong holdings, especially in the US homophile movement. And then, of course, we also just acquired the National AIDS Memorial Quilt Archive, which I believe is over 200,000 items. So it's not the quilt itself, but it's like sewing machines and buttons and zines and all of that great stuff. So it's hard to wrap your head around it.
When did you get that?
we had this massive ceremony that it's actually, and it was on World AIDS Day. And so I think you can actually watch the whole thing on our YouTube now. So it was, I think last December is when that officially went through.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So when we met, we didn't even have that collection yet. So we're very much still actively acquiring.
Yeah. So wait, go back a little bit. You said the Camden and whose papers?
So Lily Vincennes, she was the gay rights pioneer, and she was involved with the Mattachine Society of Washington. She was also the only lesbian at that first White House picket for gay rights, April 17th, 1965, which, fun fact, a Library of Congress employee was there, Otto Ulrich, but he didn't march because he was afraid of losing his job at the library, so he held coats instead. Yeah.
Listen, we all play our role in the revolution.
Yeah, I mean, he went on to be
some of us hold coats. It's totally fun.
And you got to feed the revolution, and
Absolutely.
you got to house the revolution. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, you have an astounding knowledge of what's in your collection, obviously, since it's what you do all day long. How much of the queer South do you think is in your collections?
That's a good question. The queer South. I mean, we probably have a good representative sample, but like most places, I think there's a lot of focus on the organizations that were on the coast. So, sorry, my computer locked out. 1 second. To remind myself to.
Because one of the things that we keep talking about, you know, we've been, for lack of a better word, like seeding other collections around the country with materials that we're locating here. Like there was that periodicals collection that I brought you guys. No, I'm sorry, that we sent to the Smithsonian. We need to send you a copy too. But like making sure that the queer South is represented in these places, because as we're discovering here at IHP, like just within the last, since you and I hung out the last time, we located a researcher who spent the last like 10 years or so collecting references to vaudeville female impersonation and drag performers in Montgomery, Alabama, going back to the 1860s. So,
well, you're getting me excited. Oh goodness. Well,
yeah, surprisingly, Montgomery, Alabama was like a hotbed for performance and arrest. So you're getting arrested and you're performing at really high levels. So we have a lot from the Montgomery Advertiser, the newspaper.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And was this mostly African American communities, or was this just sort of a mixed group?
It was white and black from what we've seen so far that he sent us.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so great, but I have found in searching historical newspapers that you can find references to drag culture a lot earlier in African American newspapers. So that's why I asked, but oh my gosh, I would love to see that collection. Wow. I love a bibliography.
He sent us a news article about Oscar Wilde's visit to Alabama after the Civil War had ended. And
wow.
I know. He spent a month in Alabama to see the South after the Civil War and was arrested twice in the month that he was there.
Only twice?
Oh, it was a slow month.
Yeah, it was an off time for him, you know.
So I know this is a dumb archive question, but everyone asks me, so I'm going to ask you. Like, it doesn't have to be one thing, but like, what's your list of favorite things that you guys have, or favorite weird things, which is my favorite.
Yeah. I wish that I had them with me to show you like I did when you came to visit me. But the cool thing is that we're the home of U.S. copyright. So things that other libraries would have been banning and censoring were coming in automatically through copyright. And sometimes I think they were kept on purpose, and sometimes it was maybe by accident. So we have a lot of great self-published stuff that other libraries don't have. And specifically, we have these early biographies of drag queens and the femme mimics, you know, the little pictorial things they would put together. You know, I discovered an Italian photo book of the trans community in Italy in the 60s. And I'm just always finding things because it is so vast. The general collections that I work with are millions and millions of items going all the way back to 1800. So I'm always finding cool things. But I also, I want to give a shout out to something that's online and digitized, which is Lily Vincennes has documentary footage. I think it's about 12 minutes long of the first Pride March ever in NYC in 1970. And it's called Gay and Proud. And you can just watch that online, and you can see Sylvia Rivera dancing and Frank Kameny holding a sign. And oh, it's just like so special.
That's amazing. So what is your digitization policy? Like, how often are you digitizing stuff?
Well, it depends. So the general and international collections have their own process, and special and special format collections where books have their own separate process, but constantly. I don't know what they're doing now in the quarantine, but I do have the power to say if something is out of copyright or in public domain, I can ask that it be digitized. And I can also make suggestions to the curatorial divisions about what I think should be digitized, although I don't have as much power there. For example, before Stonewall 50, I was writing a lot of blog posts and getting ready to do a lot of promotion for that. And so I asked Princeton Photographs if they could digitize just, one photo of Lily Vincennes and maybe a few gay rights posters so that I would have something to use.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think it is? Is it just because of what's the word? Like the fame or the cultural attachment to the Library of Congress that makes people feel like they can't just walk in the door and ask?
I think that's in the name. And I think it's like Library of Congress. They assume it's for Congress. And, studies have shown that people have library anxiety even at their public libraries. So, and I mean, you've been there. It's a palace. Like I have a Google phone, not to promote them, but it organizes things by what it thinks it is. And it thinks the library is a palace. It put it in the category of palace, and it does. It looks like that. And it's an awe factor when you walk in, not just the Great Hall, the main reading room. It's, even for me, starting to work there, it's very intimidating.
How long have you been there now?
5 years this August.
Nice.
I can't believe it went by so fast, really.
Yeah. Was this like your dream job to get?
Absolutely. I thought that I would be a women's and gender studies LGBT librarian at a university, maybe also teaching women's and gender studies on the side. And then now I get to do it nationally, which it's hard to wrap your head around. I think it takes a while for any librarian starting at the library, I think, to sort of recondition their focus, because it's different from collecting for an academic library where you're just collecting for right now and what your needs are, and you never have enough for all the resources that you're trying to provide your students. And here I'm collecting for now, but for ever also.
Right. Yeah, and
Oh, I'm sorry, Megan.
You've done a lot for under 5 years. A whole lot.
I'm tired now.
I mean, really, do you sleep? Wait, are you sleeping in the rafters of the
Well, I would sleep in the library if they let me, but I drink a lot of coffee.
Okay, secret right there. Secret to learning about every piece in your archive is lots of coffee.
Well, and I think too, I just have that kind of personality where I think one of my professors once told me I have a researcher's brain, which I'm always, once I get excited about something, I latch on and I can't let go, especially if it's something LGBTQ. So I seem to have a great memory for all of those things, and then can't remember what I had for breakfast. But if you want to talk about like lesbian separatism in the 70s, like let's go for it. Like that I'll remember.
We could certainly talk about lesbian separatism in the 70s.
Oh God, I don't think, that's a dangerous topic. Although I do have a separatist zine. This is a lesbian separatist zine.
Oh, wow.
Just casual.
Just on the shelf at arm's length,
I know. I do buy a lot of queer ephemera for myself as well.
I always wonder like what people keep like right in their immediate area. Because I showed you, I have my zine. I have my origami paper so I can fold your heart here. But I've been obsessed with this book.
Ooh, that looks good.
So I'm working on a new course on the queer South. And so I've been trying to build a syllabus. Ooh. And it's a hard thing to do when you're doing the kind of work we do. So I picked this book up in a lesbian bookstore in like 2001. And I've had it this whole time. I've read it. And then I picked it up again and I was like, oh, there's some really good stuff in here. There's a story in here about an African-American queer community in Russell County, Alabama.
Where's that?
It's in the middle of nowhere in South Alabama. And I picked it up and I'm like, I want my students to use this book. Well, I found out going through like an internet search that this book is available free online. So I'm like, yes, let's read this book. So I'm like making my students read it and my friends, you got to pick up this book. And I think that's kind of how we've done LGBT history and archiving for a long time. It is word of mouth in a sense, right? Because because our stuff isn't collected well.
No. And I think it'll be interesting to see, because for so long it's been community archivists primarily doing the bulk of LGBTQ archiving. Specifically, we talk about the South not being included, but also the Midwest. Like, people forget there was a Mattachine Society in Chicago and in the mid, like, they forget that this organizing was very much still happening there. And so I'm interested to see like what the relationship will be moving forward now that it's acceptable to include these things in mainstream archives and repositories. I'm interested to see like how that relationship's going to develop.
I think the hardest part for us has not been finding material. I mean, you and I talked about this when we hung out. I mean, since we were with you, we're at over, I think we're at 65 collections related to Queer Alabama just in 18 months.
Oh, that's great.
Which is a lot for us.
Yeah.
And that's just one state. And now we're in Mississippi and Georgia. And
Oh,
we're drowning in Georgia. There's so much LGBT stuff that has to have a home, right?
Wow.
But I know, it's every time we pull just one little thread, there's this other thread. And so, like, you know, lesbian separatist communities in South Mississippi, and feminist bookstores in Gulfport, and drag families that span like 5 states.
Oh.
Right. And so, like, there's just so much. And I think you're right. I think community-based archiving has been responsible for it, but we run into the problem of explaining ourselves to traditional archival repositories.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why gay people haven't brought their stuff in. And I'm like, do you have 5 hours for us to talk about this? Like,
do we trust you?
Right. Exactly. It's scary.
I mean, not every library has a place that, or has a person who has any background in it. And I think we're very sensitive to the ways in which our materials have been ignored and hidden and sort of misidentified and misdescribed in ways that can be hurtful in archives. So I think there is like, we're going to have to work on building trust with that. For sure.
Well, description is a good sort of segue too, because I mean, for years we've had very little access to ways to describe our own history. I mean, the example that I always give is I sent an undergraduate to an archive to look at a collection and they couldn't find it. And the reason they could find it is because the subject heading was homosexuality.
Yep.
It never
Hey, that's a nice one.
Right.
Compared to paraphilius.
Right.
I mean, the legacy of that actually does trace back a little bit to the Library of Congress, because we create these subject headings and then we save libraries all over the world millions, if not billions of dollars, because we give away this data for free. And so that these catalogers don't have to go through and, you know, just assign subject headings. They get that information from the library. It saves them a lot of time. However, that means that sometimes the way that we describe things, it gets echoed throughout the world. And so you have to be really careful with that. And I think catalogers today are aware of that. And you've definitely been seeing some positive changes. And there's people who work on updating subject headings. But on the flip side, we've been around since 1800, and there's a lot, millions and millions of catalog records that would probably have to be updated with subject headings. And that sort of thing takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, and queer was recently added into the Library of Congress subject headings too, right?
Yeah, and transgender, I think, is a kind of a new one. But, you know, they're still using terms, or I guess I should say we are still using terms on things like, if it's a transgender, an item about a transgender person, you know, they might have transsexual or cross-dressing. Right. So, I mean, they're historical terms, so you have to be a little understanding, but I think for people who don't understand how knowledge organization works, it can be upsetting to see that stuff.
Well, and especially in the community when we've gone from like just a handful of identities to a really vast and growing self-descriptor.
A potpourri.
A mosaic.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, it's hard. It's almost impossible to keep up and then to backtrack and try to cover that. I know that I keep saying transgendered with an ED in catalogs, and it's like, it always makes me make a face. Like it was something that happened to you, like you tripped and got transgendered.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is weird.
The transgendered experience. What?
Right. It's like, what is that? What does it mean to do that?
No.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do at IHP is that we're when we get a collection in, we have a sort of set standard descriptors that we use for everything, and then they change by geography, and then we're describing stuff down to like left-handed in ours. So when we turn stuff over to the archives, they have all the descriptors that we think they could possibly use to describe a collection.
I love that. And it's more accessible for screen readers and things like that when you have more subject headings like that, more keywords.
Yeah. Now, you all exhibit too, right? I mean, you have exhibit space. So, like, how are you putting queer stuff out in the world for us to look at?
So I think the first queer-ish exhibit that I know of was one that I did on women's music, and I just had one case dedicated to lesbian music, and then I was allowed to do another one for Stonewall 50, and so that ran for 3 months, and then in 2017, Carla Hayden came along, and she's fabulous, and she wanted to do a library-wide Pride display, and that was the first time, the only time that has ever happened, and so you can actually on the library Pride portal at loc.gov/LGBT, you can actually see everything that was exhibited that day. And it was items from every single division in the library, including National Library Services for the Blind. So it was incredible.
Can I put in a request? Can you color coordinate all the books in the library like you've done yours?
Oh, I wish.
I feel like that wouldn't be that hard. It'd be fine. It'd be okay.
You know, I've done mini displays like at book talks where like I'll have my display and then in the back I'll have like my kitschy like rainbow like books in the back. I wear a rainbow lanyard. Like everybody at the library knows rainbow is my brand.
Oh, can you talk about your workspace at the LOC, by the way, which is amazing?
Oh my gosh. What's your favorite part?
The butterflies, the rainbow butterflies that you have around the pole next to your desk.
Well, so yes, I actually bought those because there was like a Pride event and I was going to glue them to a costume. And then I ended up not doing that. So it's rainbow everything. It's rainbow everything. And then of course I have a great reference collection of materials at my desk, which I think those are also rainbow. It's been a while since I've been there. So.
Right. I just remember coming there and you gave me the tour and I was trying to seem really cool. And like nonplussed, like, oh, that's cool. That's just something from the 1600s, no big deal or whatever. Yeah. Meanwhile, you hand me this, like, I don't even remember what it was. It was some periodical from DC. You're like, oh, by the way, I just found this. And I'm like, what am I looking at? It was amazing.
I love to get people in my cube and then just based on what their interest is, just pile them with things. Because I mean, we're excited about this stuff, and it's really not so often that we find other people who are as excited about it as us, or who have the knowledge to talk about it.
Right.
It's exciting.
And I would talk about subject headings all day, like a big.
Me too.
It makes me very happy.
Me too.
Tell people, just 2 things I want to make sure people know about. Tell people about your Instagram first.
Oh, so my Instagram, my books, is it a bookstagram? I don't know. I think so. Maybe. I don't know. Kind of an archivestagram. It's at Queeriodicals. So it's QUEERIODICALS. I did win a spelling bee once, I will say, 5th grade. But so I am posting stuff that I find, not just from the library, but like little things from history that I find and I get really excited about. I'm like, oh, I've never heard of this particular person before. So I tend to go there. I'm not as cool as LGBT history yet, but I'm working on it.
We're going to talk to them next week, so we'll tell them that you said that.
Yeah, we did an event together at the Kennedy Center in February, and I'm really glad that we did because now, it's the 50th anniversary of Pride this year and it's canceled. So I did 4 events with the Kennedy Center, all LGBTQ in February, and I'm so grateful that we did it as early as we did.
Yeah, for sure. And tell people about your work to preserve websites, LGBT websites.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Well, I came prepared today.
Yes. Oh, I love to talk about the web archives. So as we know, our communities have a history of self-publishing, and now, easier than making a zine even these days, which you should still make zines, but even easier is to make a website or to have a web presence. But as we know, these are incredibly vulnerable artifacts because websites go down, they cost money, people don't have money, all of that. So I built 4 different web archive collections. 2 of them are specifically LGBTQ+. So one's a general LGBTQ+ studies website, and I collect pretty much, that's the umbrella collection. And I think we're almost at 400 sites. And I only started it, was like a year or 2 ago now. And with that being born, it kind of became the first public-facing LGBTQ digital collection that the libraries had on its homepage. I think before that, the Veterans History Project, they did on their webpage, they have a sort of exhibit on serving with pride and the oral histories they've done with LGBTQ veterans. But I think this is the first one on the main site. So then I'm also collecting, there's LGBTQ politics and politicians. So I'm trying to capture the rainbow wave of all these people who started running for office. And I do that also for women candidates.
It's a very cool project because I don't think people think enough about how we're preserving our web presence.
No, I mean, I think that's like true with like all sorts of media. We don't really think about its legacy as we're making it. I think most people who aren't archivists probably don't. So it's been really cool. And it's also like been a really cool form of outreach, because I found when I send the permission letter to archive a website, people reach back out and then they become interested, because of course, a lot of people would not put together Library of Congress on LGBTQ. They're very surprised. And so it becomes this like conversation and this outreach kind of tool, and a really neat way to build relationships.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting to get that letter.
Yeah. I love when I see people tweet. I'm like, if people tweet about it, I'm like, I'm watching. And I'm just like, oh my God. Sometimes I cry depending on the response. So.
Nice.
Pure joy.
But it is nice in a way. I mean, it reminds me of what I think of as like you said old school gay, right? Like OG gay.
Yes.
Like the way in which queer historians and archivists and oral historians are all weirdly connected.
Yeah.
Right. Even like our collections are all different sizes. We have 60 collections. You have 1 million. And so, but still, like we are connected through this web of excitement and also urgency, I think.
Absolutely.
I was watching Circus of Books last night, the documentary. So watch it.
It's got 2 words I like in it: circus and books. So I'm here for it.
It's about a Jewish couple in LA that opened up a gay porn store that does videos and books. But I'm watching it, and then the narrative is the store is not doing really well, and so they're pulling boxes out and then throwing them in the trash. And my friend and I are watching it, and I'm like white. I'm just like, oh God. And I'm like on the phone, like I want to text somebody in LA. I was like, what are you doing? Go and get their stuff. And then right at the very end, they walk into the One Institute archives with a box. And I was like, oh, thank God. Yeah. I was just like, sweating thinking about it in the trash. But I have a problem.
I mean, we have good reason. I mean, there's definitely precedent. I mean, the Hirschfeld archives burned by the Nazis. Like when I think about the early sexuality studies materials that were burned. And then there's so many publications we know exist because of all the references to them, and certain people saw them. And then, like our first gay periodical in the United States, Henry Gerber, Chicago, what was it, 1924? Yeah. No copies of those exist.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we're scared for good reason.
Well, I keep hoping that the more we talk about like Gerber's stuff and really getting people to think about how old our history is, that maybe that's turn up. It has a tendency to turn up.
Absolutely. And I think people aren't throwing away, I think we talk about like the Stonewall Effect, where we're making it cool to collect this stuff, where people, so often people pass away and their family just throws away everything. And that is something that just guts me when I think about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thinking of the stuff that we lost just in the 80s alone is heartening.
I just got goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah. Well, and, when we've come across collections that are way older than we imagined, and we have a diary from 1912 in the collection, which is beautiful, and it has photos in it, which is great. And then we look at a drag collection from the 20s through Facebook.
Oh my God.
Which is amazing.
I love that.
So it's there,
Are you familiar with J.D. Doyle's collection online?
First of all, I am in love with J.D. Doyle, like in full love with him. Yes. And we're interviewing him next week too.
See, this is what you were just talking about, all these connections in the queer community. But That was, I think I first discovered it because it's the only place where you can go that I know of online and read copies of Vice Versa, the first lesbian publication in the United States. And it's just, there's so much there. There's so much there. I could spend forever.
I spent a whole afternoon reading the cruising guides that he has, which
Those are fun.
Oh, they're so good. I love them.
So
well, and
fun.
that's the kind of partnerships that I think are really going to help us not just find stuff, but elevate it. Because, you know, one of our missions here is to get this materials in people's hands.
Exactly.
Because you know, because you're working in a big old place, like there's a
palace.
We're at a palace, right? You have to have a conversation about whether you're archiving or hoarding.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Carla Hayden talks about that, where she says, we have to get the champagne out of the bottle. So she wants people to come and experience the library, whether in person or online, because what's the point of having the world's largest library if nobody knows that they can use it or can come in and use it? So we've been making really good progress towards that, especially with our outreach and events. And then, of course, the library shut down. So, you know, I'm excited to get back to it when we finally reopen, which I have no idea, you know, I don't think anybody does right now.
Yeah, it's true. Well, this has been so awesome. I'm so glad that you had a chance to hang out with us.
Well, thank you for giving me an excuse to put on clothes, like put on makeup for like the first time. I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror. Like, who is that?
I did wash my hair today, so that happened.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Look at this.
Not wearing a robe, so it's a win.
Or like the guy that was on that morning show that you could see his whole thigh. He was just like pure meaty thigh. Yeah, he was wearing a jacket and a button up, and then just shorts, like shorty shorts.
God.
It was great.
I live.
I think this is the new standard of professionalism. That's what we're here for.
I mean, I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will put links down to everything with the Library of Congress. And when we're able to people again, make sure to plan to go to DC, stop by and visit the Library of Congress. It is like a palace, but it is not scary once you get like past the palace feel.
Exactly. Once you find me, okay, come and ask for Meg.
Yeah. And how would people? So like if people wanted to like make an appointment to come see you, or they're going what would they do?
One thing I maybe forgot to mention is I'm like a real librarian. So I love to help people with research, especially gender and LGBTQ history. So people they can use our digital Ask a Librarian service. Just Google Library of Congress, Ask Librarian. Anything LGBTQ related is going to come to me, and then we can start an email correspondence. I'm also like my email is open, my website is open. So yeah, people are definitely able to do that. And I do research consultations over Zoom, so I can meet virtually as well.
Great. And that's not just for, students and faculty. That's community people can come in and just learn for yourself, because you should.
Yeah, everyone. I've worked with people, they're working on art exhibits, they're musicians, and they're trying to research a specific aspect of queer history because they want to write a song. So I think people think that they have to have this traditional trajectory, like be a PhD, blah, blah, blah. I know plenty of those. I'm interested in the interesting questions. So
yeah. So don't be boring when you go to the LO. No. That's what we're saying.
You know what? I'm extra enough for all of us. So if you're boring, that's probably better. We'll probably get through it quicker, but
little balance there. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say or want us to know?
I don't think so, other than just keep an eye on our Pride portal, loc.gov/LGBT, because it's going to be updated sometime mid-May, because I'm going to try to do some virtual programming for June since we're not going to be able to be together. So
great. Well, we'll share that with all of our folks. Thank you so much for being with us.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.